Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're glad that you could join us today in our latest webinar, Dimensions in Practice, a conversation for finance leaders. And as we let people sneak in and join us, I'm just going to go over some quick housekeeping. Cameras and mics are on today, so feel free to pop them on. Keep in mind, try to mute yourself when you're not talking to cut down on the background noise. I'm sure you all want to hear my dogs arguing over toys throughout this webinar. A copy of today's recording will be sent out within 5 business days. And to make the most out of the session, we'd love for you to engage, respond to our polls, answer questions in the chat, and of course, ask your own questions. That's how you're going to get the most. Now, quick agenda. This one might waver a little bit depending on how the conversations go, but we're going to start with some introductions, chat about why dimensions matter and what they are, talk about common issues, real-life examples, apply the concepts, and then open it up to questions. Joining us today, we have 3 former executives from nonprofits, so I'm going to let them each do a quick 2-sentence introduction of themselves. I'm going to start with Jennifer.
Thanks, Bree. So my name is Jennifer Hume, and I'm one of the pre-sales consultants here at Sparkrock. I have been with Sparkrock for 4 years. I am a designated accountant, and before joining Sparkrock, I was a customer for 12 years. 3 years as a director of finance at a school division, and 9 years as a CFO at a human services nonprofit organization. I will hand it over to Kinley.
Hi, my name is Kinley Graham. I'm the director of pre-sales here at Sparkrock. I've been at Sparkrock for about 10 years now. I was a customer for 5 years before that, where I was a chief information officer. Coming to Sparkrock, I've been a consultant, held many different roles in professional services, sales, working with product. And yeah, that's me. I'll hand it over to Meg now.
Thanks, Kinley. My name is Meg Wilson. I'm a sales director at Sparkrock, and like my team members, I came from the nonprofit world. I was a director of finance. I've lived the world of chart of accounts and reporting, and I've actually implemented ERP, and I liked it so much I decided to come work in this industry to help other nonprofits. And although Bree said 2 sentences, I'm going to speak a little longer, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of who Sparkrock is, just for context before we go into the dimensions part of the session. So Bree? So Sparkrock is purpose-built and purpose-backed, and we come from the same mission-driven world you work in every day. You can tell from both Kinley and Jennifer and also my background. We are a team of nonprofit experienced consultants and developers, and we were founded to serve nonprofits. We've spent over 20 years, in fact, serving nonprofits. So we have a lot of really great experience that we're going to bring today in this dimensions overview. Also wanted you to know that we are a Microsoft-based solution. So the solution is secured by Microsoft stability, trust, security. We have clients in both the US and Canada, which allows also supported regional data. So if you're a Canadian customer, your data's in Canada. If you're a US customer, your data's in the US. So super pleased to do this overview, and Bree, I think we have one more slide and then we'll hand it over. Oh yeah, a little bit about our metrics. So we are, as I mentioned, nonprofit first platform built and backed by Microsoft. We actually manage over 3.2 billion in nonprofit finances annually, 1.5 billion in payroll, and as I mentioned previously, 20 plus years experience. So our commitment's simple: your mission, your data. We're here to protect and support you. Bree.
All right, now if you joined us, you might be looking for a certificate at the end of this. So to achieve that, here's our learning objectives. Today, you're going to learn about the strategic role of dimensions in improving reporting and budgeting, how to identify common issues, how to outline and improve the governance and control, evaluate your organization's current dimension structure, apply some real-life concepts like approvals, budgeting, and reporting for finance scenarios, and outline some practical next steps to help optimize your dimension strategy. But before I let Meg and Jen take it away, I want to ask you a quick question. What is the biggest challenge that you have with reporting today? Dimensions can tie directly to reporting, so I want to hear what you think. Does messy data, inconsistent use, overwhelming reports, confusion, or all of the above affect you? All of the above so far seems to be very popular. Ooh, live in action, we're changing it up. A lot of all of the above. That's amazing.
And not surprising, we see that a lot.
Not surprising at all. Okay, well, I have one more as we get a little more specific. How many GL accounts do you have today? 0 to 200, 200 to 500, 500 to 1,000, or over 1,000? So this is all anonymous, so you don't need to worry about that. We're just really curious to hear what you have to say. Some with very little, some with a lot. Really interesting.
Also not surprising.
Not
I came to a
surprising.
world where I had 10,000 GL accounts before I moved to dimensional. So
Thank you for answering. And now I'm going to let Jen steal it from me.
All right, thank you, Bree. I'm going to share my screen. I can make sure that you can see it. If I can just get a thumbs up from one of the people on camera, I can see Kinley going yes. So great, thank you.
We
very
got
much.
it.
So great. Okay, so I am going to talk about why dimensions matter. Hopefully this will be the only part of this webinar that will be someone just talking at you. We really want to, once we kind of get the fundamentals out of the way, to really have a conversation with some of the people in the webinar if you'd like to share and talk about what you're looking for. So I'm going to talk about the mechanics, then I will invite my colleagues and we'll share a little bit of our real world experience when it comes to dimensions. And I will add a few of my own. Okay, so first, why dimensions? Well, I'm going to start with talking first of all about the difference between a segmented and a logical chart of accounts. So with a segmented GL account, this is where you start with like your natural GL account. So like on the screen here, and then you add segments. Oh, someone is not muted. Get them. Can we mute them, Bree?
I've got it. Keep going.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So natural GL account, and then you have segments that represent different areas of your business. So GL account dash department dash location dash program, things like that. So this type of chart of accounts is really, really great for control because they're set up so that you control exactly how things go together, and everything is in your chart of accounts. Because if the segment doesn't exist, then you can't post to it. But the downside is, which what we saw in the survey, is that you get a massive charts of accounts because every possible combination needs to exist. And this obviously makes reporting really cumbersome. So when I say massive, I'm talking a very cluttered, like 75,000 plus GL accounts we've seen. So with the dimensional or the logical chart of accounts, so this is where you start again with your GL account, your natural GL account, and then you have dimensions that are completely separate. They're outside of your chart of accounts. And so now you might ask, well, why is this better? Well, it's better because, first of all, instead of having 75,000 GL accounts, you have 130. And we take those segments and we create dimensions. So dimensions are values that categorize entries in the system. And by doing this, you can track and analyze all the transactions you make into the system that have dimensions attached to them. And you can have multiple dimensions attached to a transaction. There are unlimited numbers of dimensions that can be created. So using a logical chart of accounts with dimensions is really great from reporting because you can slice and dice and create filters for just the dimensions that you need to do the reporting for. So let's now see how this logical chart of accounts with dimensions can meet your needs. So a typical GL account structure for like a nonprofit that uses fund accounting might look something like this. So you have the fund, then you might have the department. So the funds might be like an operating account or like a general fund, a restricted or an unrestricted fund, departments, your IT or any of your programs. And then finally, you have your GL account. This is the natural GL account that determines where it shows up in your trial balance. So those are the basics. But in your organization, you may need more. So you may also need to track, let's say, a grant. Or maybe you've got revenue coming in, so you want to track this grant. There might be expenses also that you want to attach to this grant as well. But maybe instead of a grant, you want to have a location to track. So maybe you've got 24/7 facilities, and again, you need to track revenue and expenses to each one of those locations. But you might actually need to track both. So you might want to track grant and location. So now we're getting into a more sophisticated GL with more dimensions and more things to track. So these are the examples of what I'm going to walk through to get an understanding of dimensions and how this structure supports each organization's needs. So in Sparkrock, there are many dimensions, as many dimensions as you need. You can see that there's 4 of them up here. So fund, department, grant, and location. And these are the dimensions that I'm going to work with today. So in Sparkrock, each of these dimensions can support values. So they can match maybe a numbering system or a numbering scheme that you already have that works for you. They can be numeric if you want. They can, 10 or 25 for the grant. But the system also supports alpha characters. So instead of 10 for the fund, maybe it's general, and maybe the location is south instead of 500. You can also have hierarchies within that dimension structure. So maybe the south, you actually have more defined locations, like maybe the name of the street if it's a 24/7 facility, or whatever location that you want to call it. So in your dimensions, you can have south, you can have north, west, east, and then underneath that, you can also have this hierarchy of additional locations. So this is really, really useful for reporting, because if you want to report maybe just on your south locations, then you would just report on south total. But if you want to do on St. John's, then you would then report on the St. John's dimension. So it's the same thing with any of the other dimensions, and also even with your GL account, your natural account. So maybe this is an expense. This is maybe your salaries. So 50100 is salaries. The next one is maybe timesheets, and then you can have all your benefits. So you can then actually just report based on your total salaries, which would be a roll up of all of those accounts. So again, this supports the structure that you need. It also supports as many dimensions or segments as you need as well. And it supports the unlimited hierarchy and coding that you need whether it's alpha, numeric, or a combination thereof. It also supports the reporting, and I've talked a little bit about reporting, as we're talking, but let me show you an example of how that can actually happen. So here's this slide, and at the top here you have general. So that's your fund, right? So this could be general, this could be restricted, unrestricted, it could be even a capital fund, but we'll stick with general. And then underneath here, you have another dimension. So these are your departments, right? So admin, finance, programs, IT. And then on this side, you have your GL accounts, supplies, salaries, and travel. So when you put these together and you start to look at some reporting, and you can see now the intersectionality between departments at the top and the GL accounts down the side. So you can see here when you're using dimensions, if you want to report just on admin's, excuse me, travel, you'd use these two dimensions and you'd get your 250. Or maybe it's IT supplies, again, those two dimensions, and then you would get that value for the dimension. So you can see how easy it is for reporting. Now, the last thing I want to show you on this screen is how then you can still have the totals, right? So if you want the department totals, so this could actually be like, you know, a mini P&L statement for your admin department, because you could have all of your, you know, revenue, but then also your expenses down here, and then you can have your department totals. So all of finances, expenses, all of ITs, and similarly on the GL side, if you want to know just what it is, what your organization is spending on supplies, again, that's really easy to report on. So if we go back to here, you see the structure that you need, as many dimensions as you need, the unlimited hierarchy, and also support the flow of reporting that you need, which in the end gives your data meaning. I am now going to hand this over back to Bree for another poll.
All right, I'm gonna steal control again, Jen. Don't mind me. Oh, never mind. It booted me out. Good old tech. Work for a tech company. Can't get tech to work. That's how it works with PowerPoint. So
well,
we
I
are
just
going to
stop sharing.
Yeah, we'll get it back up in a second. We are going to do a quick poll to see if you use dimensions right now while I get the PowerPoint to listen to me. Not too bad. Yes and no's. We have a mix.
I'll just wait for that deck to come back.
There we go.
And
We got to move forward a few.
Yeah, and then I'll take control.
There we go. We have one more though.
Okay, right.
I have one more to launch here. How many dimensions do you think you would need to effectively manage your organization's compliance and reporting requirements? 0 to 3, 4 to 6, or 7 plus?
That could be tricky since a lot of people don't have dimensions today, but give it a go.
Something to think about.
Yeah.
A lot say 4 to 6. Interesting. All right, Meg, take it away. How about you chat about why 4 to 6 might be a good idea?
Yeah, well, let me take control here. And whoops, it just crashed on me. Did it? Hold on. What's happening? There we go. All right. So, Jen, thanks. That was a really good overview, and I'm sure that makes sense to most of the people on this webinar, because people are often used to working with pivot tables, and so you can kind of think of it like a pivot table. But really, what does it mean? What do good dimensions unlock for you? Well, I mean, this is the heart of the story. It's not just an extra field. They're actually key to clarity, and that's when Jen was saying they bring meaning to the data. So, like, I like to think of it like a vision correction. You know, without dimensions, everything is sort of blurry and reactive. But with them, your organization can actually see the important things that are happening, the things that are meaningful to you are happening. So, for decisions, it really helps with budget clarity. And I'll talk a little bit about that with workflow. But when you've got a dimensional system and you're tracking and you're doing approvals using dimensions, you're going to have a lot of control over your spend management, because you can get quite granular on how things are approved, or depending on your organization structure, you can roll it up to just approve at a really high level budget. So it allows you that flexibility. You're going to be able to get down to the true roots of your variances. So this is like back to that kind of slice dice pivot. You can actually really quickly go through the data to see what is the root of variances when you do have them. And then it empowers your program managers, if you have them, or your anyone that's managing a fund, or generally for the people we work with, it's program managers, and you're giving them better insight because of the fact that they can actually have those tags on the data that are really important to them. And then control, huge. Again, back to budgets matching actuals. You can track, you can easily reforecast, so you're making sure you're staying within your budget. Donors and funders intent. Being able to have a dimension that's going to align with the compliance reporting you need for your funders, or just for the fact that you've got some maybe endowment fund, or you've got very specific designations for donor funds that you need to manage against. That's what dimensions bring to the table. Accountability across teams, because of the fact that you can get quite granular, you can really drive accountability because things can be very specific to certain individuals or programs or sub-programs. And then finance and program alignment. Like once you start to be able to do that, you're going to have better alignment, because you're going to be able to help your team be a little more financially literate, because they have that meaning to their data. And then a couple of other things Jennifer didn't cover, but I'd like to chat about, are workflow approvals and security access. And honestly, this was probably the thing we're seeing the most with the customers that we work with, is that it's not just about all the reporting. They really need workflow approvals. They really want to be able to have the audit controls in place to ensure that the spend management is there, things are approved, and it's all documented. So having a dimension allows you to do that, because you can use those dimensions to assign certain departments or certain funds and the people that are responsible for those, along with the spending limits. So dimensions are key to creating the approval workflows, but also the security access. Again, certainly, and we'll speak to our system, but you can get very granular on what things people can see when you've got dimensions in place. And a lot of the customers we talk to, they come to us and they're not able to do that. And that is certainly a pretty pressing priority in today's world. And this also kind of covers that approval matrix, where you've now got an admin, and it's back to what Jennifer was talking about. You've got locations, you've got departments, and then you're able to get that granular that only, and this is so small for me right now, I can't read it, but I'm sure you can, that only is it John, Meg, that can approve John Street for admin. So those are really key things that dimensions offer beyond just reporting. And related to this, better audits. Again, consistent coding, and Kinley's going to talk a little bit about how you achieve that. But being able to have these dimensions that allow you to have a lot of consistency and clear restrictions, as I just talked about, around what people can approve, what people can see, and actual accurate functional expenses. What we uncover and what we hear from our customers is when they've moved from a traditional segmented GL to this logical dimensional GL, they have fewer errors and fewer adjustments because of the way that you can use those dimension combinations. And then I've touched on this before, but modern reporting, you're going to have meaningful dashboards because they're built on clean dimensional data. They allow you to slice and dice, back to that pivot table analogy. They allow you to slice and dice so that you actually get more meaning in your data. And this is very much related to the KPIs under those dashboards. And then again, because we have less errors, as I talked about, you have better controls. You're going to actually ultimately have more reliable financial statements that are quicker to generate and less errors. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kinley, who's going to talk about some of the habits that I guess are best practice and what we've seen with our customers.
So when it comes to these decisions, you have to sit down and think about what you're trying to accomplish. So if you can just go one more forward for me there, just gonna.
Yep.
The next one, I'm sorry. So when we sit down and you actually start thinking about what dimensions you need, you're gonna feel like there's lots of solutions and there's lots of things you're trying to solve. The best thing to do is figure out what you think you might want to track and start writing those down and figuring out what those would be. Those can be based on, as Meg and Jennifer said, it could be based on governance requirements, approvals, it could be special projects, it could be lots of different things. And you really do have the ability to slice and dice all your data based on just one of those values in one of the dimensions and immediately get a useful report that tells you what you need to know. So when you're going and doing this, you're going to create the dimensions that you think you need. When you look at them, there's going to be a bunch of them, and you're going to want to make sure you're not going too far. So sometimes you have to pare back, sometimes you need to add extra as time goes on, and it's a process you're going to want to go through. Now, as you're doing this, you want to have items that are very clear. When I spoke about the order, where it gets interesting is you want to go from a macro to a micro point of view usually, but you want to keep in mind the dimensions you pick that aren't always required. So something like a project dimension is not something that would necessarily be required on everything. So for our customers, we usually recommend that being the final dimension in the series, because there are certain cases where it would be required and others where it's not. So going through and figuring out which dimensions you need and the value they provide, and then putting them in an order that makes sense is really critical to what you're trying to accomplish. Once you've kind of figured that out, though, you have to figure out next how you're going to pick and maintain the dimension values within that dimension. And this is really important because two people could understand the purpose of the naming of a dimension differently. But if you create a standard practice for how the names are created in the codes, it makes things a lot simpler, a lot cleaner. You don't get redundancy. You don't have to then migrate history. You have a clear process for creating them and a naming convention that goes with that. Beyond that, you then would want to have this series of procedures that you're going to go through when you want to update them. You want to remove them. Instead of removing them, you would usually block them so you could continue to report on them. But you'd want to have a standard procedure and a person that owns the doing that, along with the proper audit controls that go along with it. From there, the final piece in all of this is building reports that people actually use. So when you go back and you look at these dimensions that you've created and what you're trying to accomplish, you can then take that as a map for what reports that you want to create where this would provide the absolute maximum value. Those reports will continue to grow and evolve over time, but having that identification of how they tied into the dimensions and what you want to use them for is critically important. So the next thing, we're just going to kind of move into talking about some of our experiences and some of our experience, like some of the things that we've seen with customers or in our previous employments. I'm not sure if Meg or Jennifer want to jump in here with an example first. And
Sure, I'll start with I've got an example that when I did my first implementation, as Kinley talked about, you have to try to kind of figure out what you want, and it can be overwhelming. So I started out with 3 dimensions. It was a program, so I had like a supported independent living and like a shift staff home. So those were my programs, and then I had branches, and they were actually like locations. So in hindsight, I would probably call them locations now. But and then I had a third one, which was a revenue dimension. So, federal funder, regional funders, or local funders. So that worked for probably about 5 or 6 years. I believe Kinley was actually my finance consultant in my last implementation. And we actually, at that point, came up with, I believe it was 2 more dimensions that I was going to create. One was for participants, because we were getting a lot more requests from our funders to do reporting just specifically on a specific individual, like someone that we were serving. And then the other one was an employee. So, those were ways that, you start somewhere and then you can build on it. And then the last example that I will use is during the pandemic, the organization that I worked for was using the software. And of course, our funders are like, we need to know, every penny that you spent on COVID. So we created a COVID dimension, and it was easy enough to do, to create that, to to get that out to the people doing the coding, that if it's COVID, you use this dimension. And I'm not saying that the reporting was super easy, but it was a lot easier than what our sister organizations that would take weeks to try to pull together all of the information, going line by line on a trial balance, trying to figure out what was COVID related. And, so it was certainly easier for us because we had that dimension. I just did all my examples all at once. So
That's great. Could you jump one slide forward there, Mike? You're muted. Okay. So I wanted to go forward one slide here just to bring up something that Jennifer had talked about there. When it came to participant, I came from a supported and assisted living background. So for me, this employee dimension, there is definitely value there when you have different transactions that you want to tag onto individual employees. But where I came from, we used it as similar to participant. We called it individual. And the advantage here was when you had person-centered funding, we could actually tie from the time entry that a person would submit those entries to a specific individual for recouping funding from the government. And when we wanted to do that, it was simply just filtering to that individual's entries over the last 12 months or 3 months, whatever the invoicing timeline was, and I could get the exact number for what it was. And the beauty here, and you see it in the image, is that employee in this case is the very last one, or if individual, or I spoke about project earlier, is the last one. We had set it up as optional dimensions for all 3 of those purposes. And when they're optional, it really means they are optional. So when you have transactions that don't tie to a specific individual or a specific project, you just don't include that in the dimension string. And that means it wouldn't be included in the reporting that would include that dimension. It adds a huge level of power and flexibility when it comes to quick reporting. It really enables self-service. And self-service is something we're all after because we're all super busy, and it frees up a ridiculous amount of time. I'm not sure if you had anything else in there. You're still muted.
Thanks, Kinley. Yes, we also have a lot of clients that have to do compliance reporting, statement of financial information in BC. There's various names of various reports across the country, but the bottom line is they need to track the travel expenses by employee. So, and it gets granular. Like, they have a pizza lunch and there's 8 pieces of pizza, and that has to be tied to each of those 8 people eating that pizza. So being able to have that employee dimension on there has been huge for those clients to be able to create the reporting without spending, like Jennifer, you mentioned your colleagues during COVID spending weeks pulling that together. So it is very powerful. All right. So, Bree, I think you're gonna take control of the Q&A. We really want to have some open dialogue. That's why we've left lots of time for that. People post questions, and then I think in a couple of minutes we may even open it up if people want to verbally ask their question. But while you think about your questions and while you put your questions in the chat, I am going to, oh no, actually, I think that's in the wrong place. So I think, Kinley, you were going to talk about next step.
Kinley quickly is going to talk about next steps, and then
Sorry.
we're heading into the Q&A.
See, that's what happens. Sorry about that. So the next steps, if it was me, I would be going and looking at what governance needs I currently have. I would go and see what my ministry reporting is like, what my funder reporting is like, what grant reporting is like. Do I have special projects that need to be reported on holistically? Going through and reviewing those key items that I need to report on in a timely manner. I would go through and I would look at budget ownership. Is budget split up currently by departments with clear budget owners? That would be a huge identifier for how you want to break it up at a higher level. You want to look at approvals. Approvals are really huge right now. Audit is always looking at approval thresholds. Are they open? Are they closed? Is there an over budget approval? All that kind of stuff. So going and looking at the structure of what approvals should be in place for corporate governance or outside governance would be a great also thing to add when you're trying to figure out what your landscape looks like and any other requirements you currently have. Sometimes there's board members, sometimes there's leaders, sometimes there's just managers, the way you're grouping up the data and what requirements exist from a compliance standpoint and a reporting standpoint. I would take that and then I would go review what pain points currently exist from things that have happened recently. You know, recent audit, recent board meetings, recent funder discussions, recent grants. The landscape is changing a fair bit, so documenting all that stuff down makes a lot of sense. Figure out what you need. Now, the hardest thing is not jumping in and doing it right away. It's great to get it out there. It's great that we're all going to be excited to be able to do all this stuff. But what we've noticed over years of doing this is that things change depending on where you are in the year. I know myself, you close the year only once a year. You go through an audit once a year. So making this decision and not taking things into account, like different times of the year and different requirements and different things, it's a little bit of a mistake. So you want to construct this, you want to review it with your team, wait a little bit of time so that it's in people's minds and they're thinking about it, and then meet again and review what you've decided. How would that apply to the things that have happened, things going on? Do you need something additional? Is it too much? Is it the wrong direction? Like these kind of things are stuff that you can pre-plan and you can revisit a few times to narrow down what exactly you need to do. And then go from there to construct a checklist, which we're going to send you after this meeting or this webinar. There's going to be some follow-up items, and one of those is to kind of go through a process like that. And you want to document it. Documentation is my enemy. I'm not very great at it. People always have to give me a hard time about writing stuff down, but it really does help when you're trying to make decisions like this, because you can go back and see what you wrote down, why you did it this way, and now you feel different, and then make an educated decision and go forward with the right set of dimensions that you want to go with. And this is something that we help customers with all the time as a part of the project when they initialize the project and they start going. I'll hand that back over.
Yeah, thanks.
And now
let's chat. So we're going to get into some general Q&A, but to kind of start off that discussion, you know, if you could change one thing about your financial organization structure, example, the chart of accounts, what would it be? So we just love to hear what you struggle with and what you would change, and any other questions you have. And while you put your thoughts together, I am just going to, a quick message from your sponsor, Sparkrock, and this team. I have already spoken about Sparkrock at the beginning of this session and told you a bit about who we are and what we do. But I also wanted to bring to your attention that we have a really unique approach to dimensions. So as part of our ERP offering, we have this feature called account sets. And account sets add flexibility, control, and simplify the use of dimensions. And Kinley likes to call them speed keys. So what they do when we've talked about these dimensions and the combinations, they create some combinations that are things that you use all the time, or things that your program managers, they just want something simple. They are not accountants. we tell me what I need, only the accounts that I'm allowed to spend against, and that's all I want. And that's something that we, through working with our nonprofit clients, found that was really important. So we developed account sets many years ago, and we consistently hear that that is something super powerful for the nonprofits we work with. And I don't know, Kinley, if you want to add anything to that, but
it's a useful tool, and it allows you to control which series of dimensions work together. Sometimes you might have a project that you don't want associated with a certain fund, and it allows you to clearly create that relationship, make it so a person enters one field and they end up with getting the whole string. It really reduces the errors.
great, thanks, Kinley.
Yeah, and just to build on that, like when in finance or accounting, you know, the biggest headache that we have, one of the biggest headaches, is when program people code things and they just code it to whatever, and they don't really know, you know, which string to use. And so then accounting, we're always going back and we're checking to make sure the coding's right, or it gets posted and then we have to do entries to change it. So this is account sets. This is the beauty of account sets, because you can have these account set numbers can be alphanumeric. So they can, you can create them so that when that user sees that account set, they're like, oh yeah, that's what I want, you know, the program and you know, the expense. And then behind the scenes, that account set is adding all those other dimensions that the program people don't care about, but finance does, because we have to report on them. So that's really the beauty of the account sets, is giving those end users the tools to make better decisions.
And I can second that as the non-finance person here who's had to put expenses in. It is so much nicer not having to guess and then having accounting come and yell at me later. So
Yeah,
take that from your marketing friend.
We never yell at anybody.
Totally not. Absolutely not.
I'm looking at
No,
Kinley's face.
Never.
well, and Bree, I think you were going to put a link in the chat if anyone wants any more information about Sparkrock and want to learn more about account sets in particular. And you know, here's a small sample of some of our customers that have been able to realize the power of using account sets. Now, do we have any questions?
Feel free to raise your hand, put them in the chat or the Q&A. If you have questions about dimensions or even specific use cases, ask away.
Or ask us, right? You've got people from Sparkrock here, and we wanted to leave time so that we can actually have a conversation, you know, with people if you have questions, and really it'll make it makes the webinar so much more valuable to everybody here, you know, if we can get some feedback. So I'm hoping that maybe
that first poll, it sounded like everybody was struggling with everything on that list. So there's definitely people on this call that are struggling with some of the things that we believe dimensions can help address.
Well, and even the results, I'm just looking here about how many dimensions you think you'd require to effectively manage your organization. Like 72% said between 4 and 6, which that is the sweet spot, right? That is where it's manageable. Account sets work great, because if you get more than, you know, what is it, Kinley? I think it's 8 dimensions in an account set.
Yeah, it's 8 in line. But
right. So
you can technically have unlimited dimensions within the system.
Right. Yeah. But
we got a hand up.
Your accounting people maybe not be too happy if you have. Oh, we have a question. I'm going to stop talking.
That's right.
Want to unmute? Maybe we can unmute Ken here.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ken.
Yeah. Sorry. Thanks. So I have a question, but I don't know if it's going to take us into the weeds or not. So feel free to just tell me that's a question for another day. But when we're talking, and I missed the first few minutes of the presentation. So when we're talking about like the dimensions in your terms, like it looks like we're really talking about segments of the GL. Am I off base there, or you got a new way of approaching that?
So it's like taking the segmented GL and breaking it up. So in your segmented GL, I'm assuming you've got a bunch of different parts. You probably have something that's to do with a location. There's probably something to do with something like a grant or a funder or a project. You have the raw natural GL account, as we call it. You know, when we went to school and we learned about accounting, they gave us those workbooks. Actually, I'm going way back in time now. It's probably all on a computer. But they gave us that workbook with the ledger and our little T accounts and all that fun stuff, right? You know, assets are 10,000s, liabilities are 20,000s, all that fun stuff. So basically, it's like stripping out that GL account and you've got your raw chart of accounts. So in the image right here, it's just the account column. So you've just got that account column. That's your raw chart of accounts. In our system, you can go to the raw chart of accounts, just plug in one dimension value, and it'll immediately update that entire chart of accounts, the budget, the net change, the commitment, and the encumbrance, and the remaining budget, all right there. All you do is pick the value and it's done. Historically, if you had segmented GLs, you know what a pain in the butt that is, because you'd have to go and you'd have to add like the 26 different segmented GLs that added up to that total. When you enter them as separate values for each of the segments, it allows you to slice and dice the data immediately without having to total up the accounts. That was a very long-winded answer.
So the short answer, I'll summarize it. When I did my very first implementation in 2009, I had a very similar to what's on the screen there, segmented GL. So what we did was we had obviously the natural account, right? Like your GL account. And then we just took the segments and that was our first dimensions. Like literally it was as simple as that. And then like, as I said, like when I was talking, you know, over time we added dimensions because once you start working with them and understand and you're like, oh, wow, let's hang a dimension on there so that we can report on this. So there's like a starting point. And if you have a long segmented GL, chances are that's where you're gonna start. And the other thing that we always you know, talk about and Meg talked about is the reporting. Right now, when we were looking at creating a chart of accounts, and we had a structured way of reporting. We had to report on, you know, this object and this location, and it was very, very structured. So that's the way that we created the dimensions in that situation. So
in this case, then, just so I'm understanding correctly, so I guess you're talking about I don't have to enter the whole segment. So if I just want to know about the natural, I go to the natural. If I wanted to summarize on location, I can just enter the location dimension or segment is whatever, or let's say grants. If I just want to look at total grants or a specific grant, you're saying I don't have to enter all the string. I just go straight to the summarized level that concerns me at that moment. Okay.
Yeah, you can definitely do it that way.
Okay, I'm used to dimensions inside of a cubed environment. So is it similar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like slicing and dicing a cube. It's like a pivot table.
Right.
So
I'm just trying to get the difference between, like, say, the system we're in now versus how it works in yours, where if I want something, I have to go through all segments of the string. If there's 5 segments in our GL, so I've got to enter those to get to whatever sort of slice. It's very hard to slice in some cases because of that. Yeah. So you're saying with this, I can just say, well, if I want to know just all the segment of I don't know, by fund, etc., is kind of easy. But like if I want to get down into projects, was a good example, then I can just go straight there and skip all the rest of the segments.
Yeah. So just to give you hopefully maybe you can visualize it. So you think about your chart of accounts, right? Like in any accounting system. So close your eyes, you're in your chart of accounts. I'm in program supplies, I'm going to hit my actuals, and then it comes up with this big spreadsheet. And then you go to a filter and you say, I just want to know for program supplies, I just want to know project,
yes,
whatever. And that's it. Like literally,
okay,
you would be there in seconds. Kinley?
Yeah, it really is that simple. When you look at it like it's different. If you look at it like a cubed environment, it's multiple data elements tagged onto one record. That's really what it is. And you can go and say, I want all the records that have this element for this date range, and immediately it will just give it to you. You're not
Okay.
going and adding items together.
So just like, I'm just trying to picture it and make a sense of my mind. It's like a robust filtering put on top of your GL. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally.
Thank you.
And then from there, you could put it in Excel. You
Oh, yeah.
could send it to Kinley over Teams. Yeah. I could create a link and send Meg the link to it. And as long as they have the right permissions, right? Kinley looks in Teams and says, "Oh, Jen says I got to take a look at my program." Click, goes right into it. Oh, I got to do something about this. Like it's literally it's quick like that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
The other thing here is that when you look at budgeting, it allows you to have budgets at different levels. You could budget for the first 3 dimensions only and have all your numbers roll up into those amounts, and you could do your approvals based on budget to actuals at that point. You could go fully granular right down to the project level of a budget and have a budget specifically for a certain project and do an immediate budget to actual comparison just on that project instead of getting all the other noise included. It really creates a flexibility in your data to configure all of this the way that you need to make your reporting as self-service and quick as possible.
That's a really good example, Kinley, because I know in my old world, I was on a segmented GL, Great Plains, for anyone that's using Great Plains years ago, and we had to budget every line item, and we didn't need that, but you had to. So a lot of them were guesses, but we really didn't care. We only cared about the total for that particular area.
I found that one of my examples was I had 2 different year ends because of different funders. One was the Ministry of Community and Social Services, and one was a regional funder. My funder that was regional was a December 31st year end, and my MCSS year end was March 31st. So being able to tag all my information with these different data elements, even with the different year ends, I could easily run a report on a specific data element for whatever date period I wanted and immediately get out the report I needed to give back to that organization. It just made things so fast to be able to just pull based on one value and get everything you need. Thank you for asking a question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You saved everybody from
Yeah.
having to listen to me talk about cars or other random stuff. So thank you.
Well, and Michael had a really good comment around dimensions are huge when your segment ends up being used for multiple purposes, for sure. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Filters on. And when you just need temporary things like Jennifer's example with COVID, because traditional GL, your GL will just grow and grow and grow. Being able to have dimensions, as this really great chart shows, means that you're going to have a more manageable chart of accounts.
Another use for this that doesn't come up too often, but if your auditors come to you and they're like, right now your salaries account can't have your full-time employees with your part-time. We want to see that broken down. Right now, if you're using a segmented GL, I can assume you're all going to nod with me that setting that up will be a freaking nightmare because you're going to have to copy all the segmented GLs you had for your original salaries and create all new segmented GLs for that new GL account for part-time salaries. That is one time-consuming pain in the butt. In a solution that's fully dimensionalized like this, all you would do is create the natural GL account and you could actually be done because your approvals are likely based on a different dimension. You would immediately have available to you all of those other dimension values. If you wanted to have controls in place, you would use the account set functionality that Meg spoke about, and you could create the restrictions for which dimensions are allowed together. But it's way better than sitting there and inserting all these individual new segmented GLs, going to your reports, taking all the accounts and changing the way they total, creating new totals for all those segmented GLs. Like for the last 10 years, I've seen customers go over this and over this and over this. And when they hit dimensions and they actually have them, they would never go back. It really, really works that well.
Yeah, and once you have that permission for, for a dimension, adding, additional dimensions, like it just makes everything so fast, right? Yeah, definitely makes your life a little easier.
Well, and same goes for the approvals. You're going to add a new department because you've got new funding or you've got a new grant. You're just going to add that one grant to the system. You're going to add the grant value. You're going to go to your approval matrix and you're going to say, we want to have an approval on this new grant. Meg's going to be the first approver. Jennifer's going to be the second if it goes over 10,000. Close the page and you've now set up your approvals for that new grant. It really speeds things up. And I keep harping on the enable self-service, but it really does. Self-service saves you all time.
Thanks, Kinley. Thanks, Jennifer. We've only got a few minutes remaining. I don't see any other questions unless there's some that you see, Bree.
I don't see any, but I will quickly sum up what we went over today. So we chatted about how dimensions can play a strategic role in improving your reporting and budgeting. Some of the common issues in your current use of dimensions, how dimensions can strengthen governance and control across your financial processes, how to evaluate your organization's current dimension structure, how to apply dimension concepts to real-life finance scenarios like approvals, budgeting, reporting, and some practical next steps. So if you don't have any more questions, I do want you to keep your eye out for your email. We'll be sending this webinar, but I will also be sending you some checklists to help you in case you are interested in changing up your strategy, or if you're looking for a new ERP. I hope you enjoyed our commercial break. Had to put that in there funny somehow, but we really appreciate you all coming out. And you can always reach out to us. You can visit our website, reach out through our contact form, or email us at connect@sparkrock.com. Thank you, Jen, Meg, and Kinley. Always a pleasure. And I like learning about finance too. And now I don't have to do it. So that's all that matters.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.